Why don't we get started today? So welcome to class 2 of APP. Before we jump into material today, and just as a reminder, today we're going to be covering, giving you an overview of the logic and structure of the content of APP, whereas last week we did more logistics. We're going to go over this overview, but also provide some a refresher on the different methods that are employed in APP. Not that you have to use them, but these are the methods that are used. But before jumping into that, does anyone have any questions that I can answer? Yes?
So we're turning in our proposals, emailing it to Kevin, or we're doing it through CCLE, or what's the
I think Kevin sent out a link, right? And in that link, you click on it, and should be a Google form. So if you wouldn't mind filling out that Google form, because it's the preset fields, which we can export pretty conveniently. Okay, great. Yes?
It's not a Google form, it's on my UCLA.
Oh,
Okay, but there is a link that
Yeah.
Kevin sent. Okay. So the beginning half of everything I say is correct. The second clause of any sentence is a little iffy at that point. Any other questions or comments? Are you excited about the APP? Fake it till you make it. Okay. This is like the most exciting part. Like today, and then the moment after you finish your APP presentation in May. Those are the two peaks that you'll experience. All right, why don't we get started? Okay, so an outline of today, we're going to give you an overview of the different stages of the APP, and by stages, it's not so much the timeline, but more of the content, okay? And that, we hope, provides like an organizing framework for how you think about the different chunks of the analysis of the APP. Because right now you're thinking, oh, policy analysis. What does that mean? Okay, there's actually different components of that. Where would you use quantitative methods? What type? Where would you use survey data? We're gonna give you a description of where those things appear throughout the APP and for what purposes. Okay, and they fit in a pretty general, like, logical framework. Then we want to take that idea and specifically map it into like chapters of your APP. Okay, and I just want to remind you that these aren't hard and fast rules. It's just going to be a list of content in their kind of like a logical order that most APPs generally follow, even if not specifically in some cookie cutter framework, but they all include this content. Okay, so again, that's meant to be not an organizing framework for the logic, but how it maps to an organizing framework for the actual chapter and editorial structure of your document. Okay. I do have some slides on quantitative methods. Okay. I've done this for a few years now. It turns out that that's quite technical, and most of you won't use them, but they're there as supplemental slides. Okay. And I'm happy to, I'll post the slides online, so you'll have that as a reference. But those are things that we covered in classes before, whereas these two sections that Professor Panofsky and Professor Gillens are going to review, qualitative methods and survey methods, are things that are really important. We haven't spent as much time of them in the core courses, and it's a really helpful review of that material that Professor Panofsky and Professor Gillens will go over. So we'll do that today, and then I'll stay a little bit longer for Q&A. Sound good? Now are we excited? Quantitative and qualitative methods? All right, let's do it. Okay, so this is the basic logical framework for thinking about the APP, okay? There's a general motivating policy issue, okay? So some of you interested in the amount of particulate matter in the atmosphere in a particular municipality, let's say. It could be like temperatures, or it could be trying to expand health insurance. in areas where individuals aren't taking up insurance that they can avail themselves of. It could be student loan crisis and how to manage like servicer behaviors interacting with students. These are just problems that could be the amount of debt students face. That's a general policy question, okay, policy area, and that's really like a kind of a motivating factor, but it'll eventually lead to a specific client and a specific client's goals. And the question will be how to achieve those goals. Which ways can a client achieve those goals that furthers that organization's goals, okay? So there's the policy question, and then this is like the first section of like analysis, okay? Which is you wanna come up with methodologies, could be quantitative, descriptive data, trends, analysis of disparities, whatever it is. Quantitative data, it could be like evidence that's exists in the literature. It's also qualitative evidence from interviews. Whatever it is to identify the challenges facing that client, your client, in achieving those goals, okay? It's kind of like a root analysis, all right? It's understanding what are the core issues or even opportunities that your client faces in achieving those organizational goals, okay? This ends up being a really, really important part of your APP because it's from the challenges and opportunities that give rise to potential areas for policy, okay? These end up tying pretty closely together. Does that make sense? Okay. And then once you have these list of policy options, you're gonna want to evaluate those options. Now, it turns out that you can do, each one can be evaluated, then you're gonna have to have a system not only of evaluating each one. What does evaluating policy mean? Well, there might be multiple criteria along which you want to evaluate a policy, okay? How effective it is, how costly it is it feasible, so on and so forth, okay? Well, you're gonna evaluate these policies, but then you have to have some way of comparing across policies along these many dimensions of criteria. So you're gonna have that type of methodology as well, okay? And so that's a whole other set of policy evaluation. So really a lot of the quantitative and qualitative analysis that you do really are bucketed into like this section here and this section here. And they're very distinct types of analysis, okay? So this is why when students have approached me and said, oh, we need to do this for, regression analysis for my policy analysis, I really want to understand like where it fits in this like continuum of logic here, okay? Okay, and then once you kind of evaluate them, you have certain criteria, then you're evaluating these policies and comparing them across each other based on some methodology that you propose. Then you make some final recommendations, okay? And then you're done. That's the APP, okay? So I'm gonna, see all this white space here, I'm gonna fill this with examples, okay? So it's not just me talking, okay? But I first wanted to give you an overview for that general logic. Does that make sense? All right, why don't we be a little bit more specific, okay? Okay. Okay, so when we talk about like data analysis, again, there's like many types of data analysis and quantitative analysis, qualitative analysis. These are the ones that are often used, okay? Summary statistics and trends, okay? Again, so many great APPs don't need like really, really fancy probit models and discrete choice model. You could use them if it's appropriate for you, but oftentimes you can make really impactful statements by reporting compelling statistics. Wow, mean differences between groups who live here versus groups who live here are really, surprising and reveal stark inequalities. that again could be a very strong motivating statistic. Okay? It could be just trends, things are worsening, or things are worsening for one group and not the other, so on and so forth. Okay? Ends up that type of quantitative analysis ends up being really impactful. And that could be used in this section, okay, where you're just motivating a general problem before narrowing it down to your client's goals and your APP question. It could be very specific to the barriers faced by your client, okay? It could be getting to the actual inner workings of your client's, organizational operations. We're trying to expand juvenile diversion programs, and it turns out students aren't, or like the young clients aren't availing themselves of the program. Well, how do we know that? The summary statistics will show you that. Does that make sense? Okay, and it could be the same thing here, where you're evaluating the policies. Okay, and the summary statistics can show up there, right? There's evidence, let's say, that this particular policy, one of these, okay, shows some sort of effectiveness. So you're just comparing statistics from a pilot versus statistics from what's currently going on in the current programs. Okay, that's a very simple mean. It's already really compelling. So when we talk about, let's say, a particular type of data analysis using basic statistics, you can see how they'll appear in different parts of your APP depending on its purpose. Does that make sense? Okay. What I just said about just summary statistics and trends holds for all other types of analysis that you might use. Okay, and again, there's no pressure for you to use all of these, but you'll likely use many of these as needed and as fitting of the nature of your project. Again, next to simple differences, you might look at literature and doing regression analysis that have done regression analysis to show impacts or correlations. Maybe you'll perform your own regression analysis. There's qualitative case evidence, which I guarantee you're going to be using. Many of you, almost all of you, will be making a lot of use of interviews and ethnographies, okay? Particularly when you're just speaking to stakeholders and trying to understand the nature of the problems and opportunities that your client faces, right? Clearly you want to talk to people who are affected by the current policies in your client, stakeholders, leadership, so on and so forth, right? It turns out that ends up being a really, really important component of almost every APP, right? And again, Professor Panofsky, thanks for coming to speak about these issues. Okay, so then there's a cost-benefit analysis, right? That's another type of thing you often hear when we discuss policy analysis, right? Well, cost-benefit analysis tends not to be in these sections, but clearly it's going to be in policy evaluation, right? When you're comparing across policies. Any particular policy, you might do a cost-benefit analysis. Comparing across policies, you want to see which one's the stronger policy, right? You might do such an analysis, okay? All right. But you could reference the literature on existing cost-benefit analysis when you're talking about identifying policy options. There may be ones that folks here that you've interviewed have raised as a possibility, but you can already eliminate them in your lit review because evidence already shows they suck, right? They have consequences that are undesirable either for society based on your judgment or based on priorities of your client. Does that make sense? So you're going to avail yourselves of the literature and what they already say about stuff like this, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I'm hoping you're getting a sense now that there's no one tool that you use. You're using all tools as it makes sense for the logical findings of your APP. Are you starting to get that sense? Good. My work is done here. All right. Everything else from now on is just going to be providing some more specific examples to solidify what we've been talking about, okay? And this is what I was saying earlier. A lot is going to be driven by the specific nature of your APP question. as well as the specific nature of the priorities of your client, all right? Your client might just care about, you know what, I don't care about practicality. I literally just care about having blue sky, what's gonna be the biggest bang for my buck. Doesn't even matter whether it's feasible. I just wanna know that so I can advocate for it. Some are gonna be like, no, we went to pass policies by September of 2022. I need a guidebook for what am I gonna implement. So don't give me anything that I can't do. Okay? They might even say, I don't even care about it being super effective, I just wanna pass something that has some effect just to get the ball moving because of a variety of stakeholder engagement issues. They just need to show early successes, let's say, all right? These are factors that you have to like really internalize in your APP and be really transparent about it. When we talk about, evaluating the policy options, when I mentioned those criteria they could evaluate against, you'll talk about timing, feasibility, so on and so forth, okay? So your analysis will hinge really clearly on the nature of your question, but again, also on the priorities and constraints of your client. And also yourselves, okay? This is where you can push back a little bit. I mean, you're not just vessels of policy analysis, all right? You have a being, okay? If something feels, a certain criteria is really important to you, talk about it with your client. You can add that into the evaluation, have that be, a factor along which you assess policies and it motivates different policy options, okay? Okay. All right. A little bit about the question, okay? So I'm gonna take a little deeper dive right now into each of these little sections, okay? And you'll see how they all pull together, okay? And I'm gonna, the first part of the slide here is gonna be the general guidance, and down here is gonna be examples from recent years, okay? All right, so the APP question, first, you have the broader policy problems and motivations. That's gonna be like your first, page and a half, 2 pages of your intro. Okay, then you're gonna lead to the client, and you're gonna say, well, the clients are interested in these goals, and this is where we come in, okay? It's like building a narrative here. Like, here's the policy problems, general, the client is interested in this space, they have specific goals, voila, here I am, this is our APP question, our role in this, this policy area. And that question will be phrased in a way, typically it'll be phrased in a way that asks you to come up with policy or strategies for your client to achieve their organizational goals, subject to priorities and constraints, okay? You'll see in a second, like, that'll always be in your APP, but it doesn't have to be in your question itself. We're not gonna get hung up on the specific wordings of your question, whether it's like really long or short. You'll see what I mean in a second. This APP question is not research. It's not like, what are the underlying political structures, embedded in diversion programs in LA County. Okay, that could be a really interesting thesis for a PhD. That's not what you're doing. That could be part of what you're doing to understand the inner workings and what's going on in this space, but it's not what your final goal is. Your final goal is for these policy strategies that you recommend that help your client achieve their goals, okay? This is policy consulting. Okay, program evaluation. What is the impact of this policy? Okay, that's also not what you're doing. It could be part of what you're doing. You'll need to know this if it's one of the policies you're assessing, okay? But it's not the only thing you'll be doing because you're doing a whole lot of other stuff up here. Lit reviews, okay? Again, you're not just doing this. Your client may ask you, oh yeah, it's great, we're working with the UCLA team. It's a really great team. And we wanna know this is what they reach out to you, say, we wanna know, what's been done out in other municipalities. That, all the time, students come to me and say, that's what my client wants. That's not what you're doing, okay? It's a great first step, you will be doing that, but you'll be doing more than that. You'll be answering a question about what are their agency goals and how best they can achieve them. It may start with a lit review, but it'll end with you making some sort of a set of recommendations that help them achieve their goals, ideally. Now, that's 99.9% of APPs, and there's some APPs that might differ. Please be open and talk to your advisors about that, okay? All right, so it's not any one of these alone, but potentially all of these or some of them towards answering questions like this. Okay, what are examples? Okay. This one won top honors back when we had top honors, okay? How can LA County structure consent in juvenile diversion programs to enhance quality and life outcomes, okay? So the way they phrase this one is, see, it's like a how statement, all right? How can the county, they're working the juvenile diversion program, they wanted to come up with a way to design consent for juveniles. It's a tricky situation, okay? Particularly if like guardians and parents aren't actively involved or may even be abusive and so on and so forth. So it's a tricky situation when you have juveniles consenting. All right, how do you do that in a way that enhances quality and outcomes for the clients? Okay, so there's a how statement, okay, and this one actually specifies the goals, okay, of how to reform this program. Okay, that's how that was stated. How should the city of Santa Monica regulate the expansion of e-scooters to reduce emissions and improve safety and also equity? This was an equity of access, okay? So in this also is a how statement, all right? And again, how should client, okay? And then this kind of gives rise to the scope of things that they're considering. Regulating an expansion of the e-scooter usages. Okay, in this one, they actually explicitly emphasize some of the priorities of the client, which is to reduce total emissions and improve safety and equity. Okay, all right. This was a really interesting one. How should the Venice Family Clinic, is one of the biggest clinics for indigent patients in all of America, how should the Venice Family Clinic protect healthcare access among undocs in a time of increased anti-immigrant rhetoric and deportation? They were literally worried about designing protocols to protect identities and backgrounds of individuals if ICE came in and took computers. Okay, so they had actually a playbook, an emergency playbook of when to shut down the computers, in addition to all sorts of other things like how to encourage increased usage among undocumented immigrants of the Venice Family Clinic facilities, given that these individuals didn't want to come to the clinic anymore for fear of deportation. Okay, so this was like a really interesting project. Okay, but again, you can see how it's a how type question or what are ways type questions. Okay, it specifies the program, it specifies some goals, but you can see how the way that these are structured leads to it like compels you as an answer to identify policies and strategies that help them best achieve those goals. Does that make sense? All right, cool. All right, next, okay. So this is, again, like how data was used in this particular one, in this particular APP, how LA County can structure consent in juvenile diversion programs. Okay, so in this section, data was used in the following ways, all right? They had reported in this intro section, trends in arrests versus diversions. So this was just done by summary statistics and trends, okay? They then reported differences by race. The racial equity was a big part of this particular APP. All right, so just in the intro, they drew on arrest data among juveniles by race just to show the disparities as a motivating factor for their APP, okay? And then their point was that diversion, they wanted to establish that diversion generally has been established as a good thing as opposed to incarceration, okay? And it turns out there's a rich literature already in the criminal justice research world that provides really compelling evidence for like lower recidivism, better mental health, and all sorts of other positive life outcomes for diversion as opposed to incarceration. And again, that was just something that they pulled from literature review. They cited existing evidence from ethnographies, evidence from quantitative analysis. These are just lit reviews, and drew those results and substantiated arguments they were making in the introduction. Okay, you can see how there's a logical flow there where they wanted to establish, hey, there's this general problem. There seems to be some policy solutions, general policy solutions like diversion, that lead to better outcomes. And focusing on the restorative justice thrust of criminal justice reform, boom, that's a general statement. Client, this is my client, this is their specific pilot program, these are the specific goals to expand it in ways that can also that improve the quality outcomes for their clients in a way that's consenting for juveniles, that's safe and protecting them. And that leads to their APP question. See how it kind of like narrows down? All right, but this is how analysis and data, both qualitative and quantitative, are used to create that narrative. Okay, it's a very strong logical links. Okay, so you can see that when we talk about like data analysis, it's used in different ways throughout your APP. Okay. Okay, you probably already have a sense for this already. If you already have an APP question, you're probably already trying to like come up with these arguments right now, which is a good thing. All right. Okay, identifying problems and barriers. This ends up being a really exciting and challenging part of your APP. Okay, this is what ends up happening for most groups. Okay, you end up doing a bunch of interviews, a bunch of lit reviews. You download a bunch of data, and that's where you start. Okay, it can be daunting because you just get overwhelmed with like the Niagara Falls of data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. Okay. The key thing here is you're gonna just develop a set of facts, a bunch of facts, hundreds of little facts. The challenge here for you is to take all that data and synthesize it into insights, okay, about your client. And that ends up being a challenging process because you're actually learning a lot about the client, policy space, stakeholder relationships, and all of that. You end up learning a lot. This is where all the deep knowledge comes from, is taking those facts and developing knowledge. Okay? You'll then start to see that, oh, this fact here, and this fact here, and this fact here, I see it has like a cohesive theme about it. And what that means is that my client faces issues on stakeholder engagement, and there's this differences between what agents wants and what clients wants, and what advocate group wants. And that ends up being some tension, and that tension gives rise to certain problems. Well, that's an insight that you just gained from a whole series of facts, okay? There's like a million different examples of what that means, but as you engage in your research, that will become evident, okay? So, identifying problems, okay? Well, in this particular case, okay, this was based on, they did a lot of really great qualitative interviews, okay? And in this particular case, okay, they talked to a lot of legal scholars about like legal issues associated with consent. Then they talk to stakeholders about what are the pros and cons of expanding how they can conduct consent versus having a very constrained definition of consent. Okay, there's these trade-offs that they made, and they just mapped out these really clear trade-offs. Well, when they did those interviews, it was just some person saying, oh man, if we like just ask juveniles, you know, whether they're gonna, you know, come in, they'll say yes, but now these other problems too. And then vice versa, they talk to someone and say, oh no, we need to have a really narrow constraint because we want to have protections and, you know, the guardians have rights and so on and so forth. They had to like put that together into a cohesive theme where they mapped out this nice diagram of like the trade-offs as you had consent that are wider or narrower. Okay, so it took a lot of that research and pulling things together and synthesizing it to come up with this framework for understanding a trade-off. That trade-off was like findings number 2. There's a trade-off between this and that when you do that. See how like a lot of work came into identifying this key insight? All right, this is gonna be your challenge in this section, is doing a whole lot of research, a bunch of facts, and you have to like think about how those things come together into a coherent number of insights. Does that make sense generally? Okay. This team also found a whole bunch of like social and also administratively logistical issues related to consent, okay? It even came down to, again, they did these really wonderful interviews where they said, well, if a police officer is the one making, it's like offering the consent, it's a very different dynamic and power dynamic than when a social worker does it. And then they went into this really great analysis of community trust issues with police, but also like police training, in that even well-intentioned police aren't trained to speak to clients in ways that foster trust. Okay, and you can see how rich this study was, okay? But that came out of a lot of really detailed interviews, okay? And again, that's just hundreds of hours of interviews, but isolating these key insights, okay? Because it also related to what literature said, and everything kind of just comes together because that's what's going on. All right. Okay, so again, I didn't say that also to highlight once again that you have, for any one of these like facts, you're also drawing upon different types of methodologies to make that point. They all like support each other. Okay, does that make sense?
Where you have, say, names next to their quotations, you're going to have a lot more credibility in your report. It could potentially be a lot more powerful, but they might not be as open to saying things if you were going to work that way. Often I think that a viable strategy for you all is one of these, either a default of kind of off the record, but if there's something that someone wants to say, something you want to use, you would check with them. Hey, would you mind later, can we get back in touch with you and check this quote? Or potentially the reverse, which is like, you tell me if you want to remove anything from the record as we speak, or something like that, right? So anyway, but it's worth thinking about this and talking about it with your interviewee up front, and that's part of building that trustworthy relationship.
So this all sounds like it's very like up to the individual person, but like I used to do journalism and it was pretty much like things were on the record unless they said it was off the record, and once something's on the record you can't take it off. That doesn't really apply here because a lot of it is about like relationships.
I think that that's
Really
right.
somewhat apply. Like if somebody like
I think that's right, and I think to some degree that's true in journalism too, but I think journalists have kind of like built a norm that is like kind of consistent across journalists, right? So it's become highly controversial when it's people who speak on background or people who speak off the record or whatever. So I would also say the other thing is that some of the people that you interview will be used to being interviewed by journalists, and they'll kind of know that, and then kind of know how to guard themselves. Others will be completely naive from the point of view of having never interacted with journalists. And so with those people especially, I think it's important to kind of establish or discuss some of those ground rules rather than just, going where you're talking to them and you can hear them furious typing in the background. Oh, they're writing down everything they're saying.
it another possibility to quote someone, but just not the name, and just say, oh, service provider head, and that's it. So it's like somewhere in between
Yeah.
those two options.
Right, there's that as well, right? And lots of times that actually might even be more useful to you anyway, because it's not that the particular person's name matters, but their role matters more, right? Right, this is a client liaison versus an agency head, right? Like those roles matter for your analysis, but not the person per se. So that might be another way to think about it.
It just can't be like the chair of public policy department.
Right, there are other, right, and then you have to be careful, right, that some of those ways of concealing identities are bogus. Right, President of the United States said anonymously. Okay. So the other thing is that you should think about how you're gonna record interviews or record information, okay? Are you gonna do just handwritten notes while they're talking to you? Are you gonna do handwritten notes with a recorded backup? So you might put your phone out with the recording. Are you going to, sometimes people do handwritten notes, but then afterward they go into a quiet area and they will do a voice reconstruction of your voice into the phone of particular things that they said. Another might be taking notes, recording, and then getting a transcript of that recording, right? Submitting it to a service where they'll type up, or you type up the entire transcript, right? And so of course these different techniques have a trade-off of detail versus time and expense, right? So often a full transcript, that's often the gold standard in social science interview research, but it's usually overkill for your purposes, right? You don't necessarily need every single word.
How long did you have to wait to get the service that you came for? And again, it could be a matter of a couple of dozen interviews, or it could be 100 collected over different times of day. You can find your respondents in different ways depending on the nature of the organization. If it's something where there's sort of a set group of like beneficiaries that the organization has contact information for, you could contact them in that way. If it's just like whoever shows up, right, you could go on the days that, like, let's say a food bank, and interview or survey people who are in line for that food bank. So those would be individuals. It could be that there's individuals who aren't being serviced, but they're kind of like the target group, right? The group that your client wants to engage with. So, for example, if you're advising a city on like how to reduce the waste associated with like fast food packaging, then the people of interest might be people who are like sort of basically potential fast food package wasters, right? So people who are like let's say it's like coffee shops, and you want to know, would people be willing to like bring their own cups rather than getting disposable cups when they go for coffee every morning? So the people you'd be interested in interviewing would presumably be people, at Starbucks or wherever they're going for coffee. And you could, stand outside and, can I ask you a few questions? And you would record, in again, a sort of structured, systematic way, a series of questions about, did you bring your own cup? If, it was 25-cent discount or what. Another example from another student project was a city wanted to plant trees along the sidewalks, and they had money from a grant to plant those trees, but what they didn't have was money to take care of the trees. And when trees are newly planted, they need to be watered, periodically and so on. And so the question was, would the people who live along those streets take care of the trees that the city was considering planting in front of their houses? And so they did a survey of people in houses in the, relevant neighborhoods to see, whether they were able and willing to do that. Okay, so that's like another set of sort of individuals. Yeah, question?
Do you know from previous years, like how many people they were serving?
Well, I personal experience, there was one survey of organizations, which I'll get to in a second, that surveyed maybe like 50, 60 organizations, I don't really remember exactly. There was another project that surveyed individuals who were kind of like alumni of a program, a civic engagement program, and they probably surveyed about 25. This tree project surveyed a few hundred people, so that was like a larger scale survey. So, it really depends a lot on the nature of the question and, of course, your resources. And in some cases, like with my example of charging stations, maybe there's only like 10 relevant respondents. So it also depends on sort of how big, in sort of survey research terms, the word would be the population you're interested in is.
There have been cases in the past where the client themselves want to do a survey, but they end up taking your guidance on how to design it, what questions to ask. And in those cases, there's potentially significant resources and support to do that. There have been a few cases in the past couple of years where the medical school's alumni base was surveyed, and that netted several hundred respondents. But in other cases, just as Gillen said, it could be like 11 clients of a clinic, let's say. So it all depends on the nature of the project.
Thank you. Very true. Okay. It could be, as I suggested a second ago, that what you want to survey is not individuals per se, but organizations. So perhaps organizations that your client deals with. One APP project was interested in the challenges that small community-based organizations had in contracting with LA County to provide like services to adolescents who are at risk. And so the sort of relevant respondents for that survey was these organizations within the county. So they came up with a list of community-based organizations. They tried to contact as many of them as they could and ask them again a series of sort of structured questions about their experiences in trying to contract with the county, or if they hadn't even tried, like why not? And again, I would characterize it as a survey because they had sort of a set of questions that they wanted to ask of all of these organizations. Now that did not preclude them from having some sort of open-ended discussion as well, right? And so one of the things that was asked with Professor Panofsky's talk was, the challenge of wanting to have kind of systematic and consistent questions across like different, kinds of, say, organizations or individuals, but also wanting to have an open opportunity to learn about the specifics that any respondent might be able to provide. And so you can combine those things, and oftentimes what researchers will do is first ask a set of sort of structured questions, and then kind of give the opportunity, and perhaps with some prompts about, can you tell me more about X or Y, in order to like learn more and provide sort of a more natural, forum for the exchange of information. Okay, another possible sort of target for a survey would be your client organization's employees. Right, so another student project example was in a hospital. The hospital was concerned with the failure to refer mental health services those patients or family members who they thought could benefit from mental health services. So they might have been in the hospital for some other reason, but as is often the case, when there's serious illness involved, there were also clearly some mental health issues. And the hospital felt like, the people who were dealing with the patients and their families were not making those referrals, and they weren't sure why not. So the student group did a survey of hospital employees to try to understand, what information those employees had about like mental health resources that they could refer patients to, how the employees felt, about like whether that was part of their job or not, what other sort of obstacles employees might have encountered. And then because they had surveyed a fair number of people, I think in that case maybe about 100 or 120 people in the hospital, they could say like, well, we found out among like nurses or among the social workers or among, these different hospital employee groups, there were different kinds of obstacles or different sort of degrees to which those employees were making those kinds of mental health referrals. All right, so your client, organizations, employees. Another possibility would be to survey organizations that are similar to your clients, right? So if your client is a food bank, you could imagine doing a survey of other food banks that maybe are dealing with similar social populations, right? And again, asking a set of structured questions about, their experiences during COVID or how their population seeking food has changed over time, how the organizations have adapted to those changes, if there's, more families or fewer families or unhoused individuals or what. So you could, again, do an organizational survey. How to collect survey data. So, like one distinction would be to actually have your survey respondents, whoever they might be, sort of fill out the survey. So you could send like a web link for an online survey to people. You could, if you're doing like would you be willing to bring your own coffee cup survey, hand someone a clipboard, right, sort of old school style, and a pencil to fill out the survey. You could then like, sort of transcribe those results into a spreadsheet or something. Or of course you could fill out the survey yourself, right? So the community-based organization survey was mostly done on the telephone. They called people and then while they were talking, filled out the survey. In that case, they might have used like a web form themselves to fill it out as just a convenient way to kind of input the data. Okay. If you do either of those things, you could use like Google Forms is a very quick and easy and free way to create like a data entry form. Either one that you would use or one that you could again send like a link to whoever's going to fill out the survey. The Luskin School now has access to Qualtrics, which is a sort of more sophisticated way to do the same thing. You write a set of survey questions, and it's a little more flexible as far as how a respondent answers one question might, lead some respondents down one path of, subsequent questions. But if they answer a different way, it leads in a different direction. So, you can write somewhat more complicated surveys with Qualtrics. But you don't have to do any of those things. I mean, if you're, kind of collecting the information, you can just, type it right into a spreadsheet, and then the data will be there and you can analyze it. Okay. All right, so last few minutes. In addition to collecting your own data, you might find, as many APPs have, that there are existing survey data that can shed light on the questions that you're trying to answer. In some cases, the client you're working with may already have useful data. Mentioned a second ago a civic engagement program. This was run by United Way, and it was sort of participants were LA Unified School District high school students, and they had surveyed those students as they entered the program. So they knew something about the students' backgrounds, their knowledge of like civic issues, their motivations for being like civically engaged and so on, and made that data available to the APP group. In that case, the APP group went back and surveyed many of those same individuals who were then like alumni of the program, who kind of been through the program, and asked some of the same questions, but also a different set of questions about, how they felt the program was effective or ineffective, or how it, changed their lives or didn't change their lives, and so on. There's other data sets that also you might find very useful for addressing, say, specific questions within your APP. So if you're doing something that involves like the city of Los Angeles, the Luskin School runs a survey every year or every other year, I'm not sure, where they ask lots of questions about the quality of life that different sort of groups and neighborhoods in Los Angeles experience. So satisfaction with, housing and the environment and transportation and employment and so on. And that data are all available, so it can be analyzed by where people live, by their race and ethnicity, by their income levels, by their occupations and ages and whatnot. So depending on the nature of your project, that kind of information could be very useful. A lot of government data is also available, like census type data. You could find out like where neighborhoods in LA that might be most in need of the services that your client provides are, and match that up with where services are being provided, right? And so you can see like where there's sort of like gaps between what you might expect the needs would be and where the services are being provided. Okay, so survey data, a lot of APPs don't have any survey data, but yours might benefit. So just keep that in mind, there's a lot of options. And last thing I'll say is if you do decide to collect your own survey data, plan for extra time because there's always going to be like hitches, it's time consuming, but it can also be a very valuable addition to your APPs. Okay, so Kelsey, anything else before we get our
No, just a reminder to submit your proposals by 4 today. As mentioned, Kevin has sent it to the form, so please fill that out. And if for those of you, I think it's a very small number of you who still aren't in the